What's God doing in cities in this moment?
I feel like we are living in a very exciting season of God is drawing near. And I believe that there's hunger and desperation. I think that people are coming to know Jesus in unexpected ways. In my church in New York City, in the last 2 months, we have seen the most salvations, I think, in the history of our church ever. Wow. We have seen the most salvations out of the whole of last year, just in 2 months.
Extraordinary.
Which it goes to say that there is a desperation and a need for Jesus and a confrontation where we have tasted everything and nothing feels enough except for Jesus Christ.
Welcome to the lead podcast for Advocate Collective. We're an organisation that supports public advocacy for the Christian faith and provides support for professional therapy to survivors of abuse, church hurt, violence or persecution. And we also empower women in their workplaces towards the Great Commission. And today on the podcast, we are absolutely delighted to welcome Ale Siekmeier, who is actually the chair of the board for Advocate Collective. So she's kind of my boss, which is kind of exciting. Ale Siekmeier is a certified life and relationship coach based here in New York City. She's the founder of the nonprofit The Net, a modern approach to Christian singleness, dating and pre-engagement. She's passionate about women's ministry and the transformation and healing of the soul. She speaks regularly in podcasts and at church events and courses throughout the year. Ale is from Guatemala and has over 17 years of ministry experience, mentoring hundreds of women and men, inspiring them to live whole and integrated lives. And she's been happily married to the wonderful Ben for 14 years, nearly added a year for you there, 14 years. Welcome, Ale. It's such a joy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to have a conversation with you. I have such a big heart for Advocate Collective and I just love our friendship.
Me too. So honestly, it's going to be wonderful. Okay, Ale, let's begin with you personally. Can you tell us a bit about your personal journey and how you got here eventually to New York City? So give us an intro to who is Ale Siekmeier.
The journey of my life, which it was many turns and twists to get to New York, but I was born and raised in Guatemala, grew up in a Christian home. I got saved at the age of 17,
Wow.
Gave my life to the Lord on a radical encounter when I was in rehab.
Wow. Yeah.
And I told the Lord that I wanted to know him and serve him for my entire life was dedicated to him.
Amazing.
Then I went to school in Guatemala, finished my education there, and never in a million years I would have ever thought that I was going to end up in New York City. In fact, I wanted to do mission work in Africa. I thought that was going to be the trajectory of my life, and the Lord had other plans. I'm a missionary, I'm a modern day missionary in New York City.
Wonderful.
So I've been in the city living with my husband, Ben, and we have been here for 10 years.
Wow.
So before we moved to the city, we were in ministry school in Northern California.
Yeah. Is that where you met?
We met actually in YWAM.
Okay.
Years before. We actually met 16 years ago.
Wow.
And
amazing.
We met in Guatemala doing mission work. Then had a long-distance relationship for 3 years, got married. Our marriage was in rocks, so we decided, let's go to ministry school. Maybe this will help us.
Not what most people think.
Exactly. We were like first year of marriage, we went to therapy, and we went to ministry school.
Well, just because you I guess you dated long distance, and so maybe you were so different.
We were so different.
And then you're suddenly together, and it's
so different. We were culturally different. And also I come from a life of trauma. And I'm going to expand more on that in a little bit. But I had so many unresolved wounds and so many triggers. And obviously, like, being married is like proximity for someone that will trigger you and you will trigger them.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the tools to have a healthy relationship. So we ended up going to ministry school. We were young, we had the time, so we decided, let's go to ministry school. And when we were in ministry school, it was pivotal we both received personal healing and transformation. And also that's where our call to move to New York was crystallized.
Wow. And what was it? A kind of word or a dream? How did that word come about?
So it was a series of multiple confirmations. First of all, I had this dream. I dream a lot. I dream mostly every night. And a lot of the times my dreams are from the Lord. A lot of the times it's just I ate pizza late at night. So
discernment needed.
Exactly. A highly discernment needed. But I had this dream where I was overlooking, I was in a building, almost like a high-rise building.
Yeah.
And I was overlooking at New York City.
Wow.
And in the dream, I was praying and prophesying over the city. And I just heard the Lord speak to me in my dream, and he said, New York. And it was a very random dream at the time. I thought, oh, this might be like an intercessory dream.
Yeah.
And after ministry school, Ben and I were deciding, like, what should we do? Should we stay here and be pastors at this ministry school, or should we go somewhere else? Ben had studied business in school, and I had studied leadership. And we just knew that Ben was called to the marketplace, and so did I. I was called to be around people who don't know the Lord.
Yeah.
And we went on a prayer walk, and in that prayer walk, that's where the Lord spoke to us both individually.
Yeah.
And he said, move to the East Coast.
Wow.
And we just knew this pressing feeling that we were supposed to move to New York.
And so you arrived.
And so we arrived. 10 years later, we have been here ever since then.
Extraordinary. That's amazing, Ale. Honestly, I don't think I'd heard it in that much detail. So in the podcast, we're kind of interested in different leadership journeys. And I know that you're a spiritual mentor to lots of people. And you've also pioneered kingdom and entrepreneurial ventures. Can you describe to our listeners that career path? So you arrive in New York City, you've been formed in some ministry, you've received some healing, I guess, by this point as well. So you arrive here. How did you find your way into the work that you've ended up doing? Because in a way, it's a blank slate, isn't it? You just arrive in a city.
Yes. And not in just any city. You know, in New York City, where there's so much pressure in career and ambition, and everybody's so driven and so motivated to win and make it. So for me, it has been a journey, and actually I have pivoted careers. So when I first moved to the city, my whole background is in ministry. I went to Bible school, to leadership school in Guatemala. I thought I was going to be either a pastor or a missionary, doing ministry my whole life. So when I first moved here, a friend of mine said, you know what, my job is hiring. And it was a cancer center. It's one of the most renowned cancer hospitals where they do research and treat cancer in New York City. And she said, they're hiring, and I think that you would be perfect for that.
Wow.
And I told her, I have zero experience. Like, me? Really? Me in the medical field? I have no medical background. And she said, no, you don't need medical experience to do this job. I feel like you are really good with people.
Yeah, that would be what would be needed.
And that's what, like, this role needs, is someone that has, like, compassion and empathy and is friendly and has good rapport with people. So I started my career as a patient advocate at this hospital.
That word again, advocate.
Advocates, a patient advocate. I work with patients that had stage 4 GI cancers. So in the palliative department, built a lot of friendships and relationships. But after 3 years,
exhausting.
I couldn't take it anymore. Emotionally, my soul was heavy. I love people deeply. And I was forming this bond with people of friendship and getting to know them and their stories and their journeys. And then, unfortunately, shortly after, people were dying.
Yeah.
So I just emotionally couldn't do it anymore. And so much good came out of that. You know, the Lord prompted me to preach the gospel in the hospital room with patients.
Wow.
I led a dear friend that I met there to Jesus.
Amazing.
Ended up leading her funeral in a church in Manhattan.
Wow.
And preaching the gospel
To all her friends.
to all her friends at the funeral. So the Lord used that season for good. But then I wanted to do something different. And another friend said, you know what, you would be great working as a chief of staff at commercial real estate. Would you ever consider doing this role? So I took a role as a chief of staff at a real estate law firm. Very different environment than what I was used to. Worked there for 3 years, learned business. Not easy at all. It was very tough, toxic culture.
Right.
It challenged me in every way. Challenged my faith, challenged my identity. But it grew me in a great way. And in 2019, the Lord reminded me that when I was in ministry school, I took a coaching course. I got certified to be a coach for me. I wanted to know what I wanted to do in life, where I was going to go. And the Lord said, this is actually what you were meant to do.
To be coaching others.
To be coaching, to be helping others. It's your story of healing and resilience. I have given you a story so that you can help others to grow, to heal, and to be resilient. So I pivoted. And that's when I began my coaching practice.
Amazing. Ale, how extraordinary. That's wonderful. Okay. So on this podcast, we are talking to extraordinary leaders, which you are, who are leading in, I guess, breakthrough places. And New York City is one of those places. It's such a strategic calling to be here. And it really does feel like God is moving here at the moment, unlike, say, even 5 years ago. What do you sense the Lord is doing here in this city, but also in other global cities right now? Because I know you travel quite a lot too. What's God doing in cities in this moment?
I feel like we are living in a very exciting season of God is drawing near. And I believe that there's hunger and desperation. I think that people are coming to know Jesus in unexpected ways. In my church in New York City, in the last 2 months, we have seen the most salvations, I think, in the history of our church ever.
Wow.
We have seen the most salvations out of the whole of last year, just in 2 months.
Extraordinary.
Which it goes to say that there is a desperation and a need for Jesus and a confrontation where we have tasted everything and nothing feels enough except for Jesus Christ. We're seeing in university campuses people coming to know Jesus, confessing sins, getting baptized the same day. A friend of mine brought a friend of hers from a university, an Ivy League school here in New York City, to my church a couple of weeks ago. Her friend has never heard about Jesus. In that service, she wanted to give her life to Jesus, and then she became filled with the Spirit.
Wow.
All in one day.
Yeah, come on, Lord.
I just feel like what the Lord is doing in the global church is he's really awakening hearts. And he's staring out hunger, but there's this tenderness and this softness. It's almost like, as I pray about it, I just have this vision of there's rain, and the rain of the Spirit of the Lord is softening the ground of the hearts of people. So I just feel like we are living in a very exciting time where the church is being awakened.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? What's changed? What has... How have things kind of come together so that this is what's happening?
I think that it's our only way, right? Like, I think in the past people have put faith in politics, in career, and we have realized this is not enough. Like, our faith does not lay on politics or in our careers. Like, there has to be something more.
And somehow the Spirit is just stirring with that human hunger. That it's fascinating. So Ale, you mentioned trauma, and on this podcast, that's been a theme we've kind of explored together, both with my husband Frog, who's a survivor of trauma, and also with a psychologist. We've talked, it's an interest for this podcast because I think it's such a critical area for leaders. So many of us are trauma survivors in different ways. And you've obviously had to overcome hurdles and traumas in your life and to grow through those things. Can you share something of that with us? How has that looked? What are some of the tools that you've needed and that you've found have been helpful?
Trigger warning.
Yes.
I am very honest with my story.
Yeah.
Just because I have encountered great healing and freedom. And I hope that as listeners listen to my story, that they will find hope and healing through just a small part of my story. But I'm a survivor of abuse, sexual abuse. I experienced sexual abuse when I was a young girl by a family member.
Sorry, yeah.
And obviously this created a distorted view of my value, my identity, of safety, right? Because this was a family member, someone that was supposed to be very safe.
Yeah.
So this always laid in the back of my head. And I never really told anyone because my family is a highly performance family. And secrets were very, very common in my family. You know, it was I came from a family background where we're very secretive. We don't really say the bad things that are happening behind the scenes.
So you just put a public face of success and happiness on.
Exactly. While in the background, you know, there's deep pain and trauma. So obviously this led me into a cycle of toxic shame. And when I was a teenager, I was 15, I was at a party, got blacked out drunk, and was sexually abused by multiple men. And obviously this, you know, destroyed my confidence, and it just really brought confusion and deep pain and trauma.
Layer upon layer.
Exactly. Cycles, like deep cycles.
Yeah.
So I think I am here today because of Jesus and for, you know, his redemptive work for me, but also because I have received professional help. I'm a huge advocate in counseling. I have gone to therapy, and therapy has been a huge part of my story and my journey. I have done trauma therapy.
Yes.
And that has brought healing, and also it has shined a light into what is true.
Yes.
I grew up thinking what happened to me was my fault. I got really drunk, so I caused that upon myself.
No. Yeah.
And in therapy, and through my relationship with Jesus, I have discovered none of what happened to me was my fault. It was sin done to me.
Absolutely.
And it never, and what happened to me doesn't mean that it has to shape my identity.
Amazing. Thank you, Ale. And thank you for sharing so vulnerably. I know that it's something we're really committed to at Advocate Collective, is centering and providing professional help for people, not you know, obviously we believe in the power of prayer and community. Absolutely. And that comes alongside, but we also need the tools of the psychological professionals to help, and so it's so powerful that you're able to share that story, and also to sit here today as a kind of embodiment of hope, because God has brought you through in the most beautiful way. And, you know, the way you live your life now is such a testimony to hope. Thank you. So a kind of related question, I guess, is around role models. And I think you are a role model and a mother to many and a mentor to many in the church. But often, and part of the reason we're doing this podcast is I guess to showcase how many amazing Christian women there are who are going ahead of us and creating a way for women coming through. I know you're a mentor to lots of women who work in this city in creative and financial and tech industries, all sorts of industries. What would you say to younger women listening to this who are wondering what God's call is on their life? What kind of word of encouragement would you give to them?
I would encourage you to surround yourself with people who are going to believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. I think that for me, in my story, I had 2 mentors that were pivotal in my story. They were the first people that I confess what had happened to me in my trauma, and they sought with me in that place and wept with me, pray for me. And they call my destiny out. They said, you are a leader of leaders.
Amazing.
We see the hand of the Lord in you. And we want to come alongside you to support you and to champion you. And I think oftentimes we think...
Where were they, Ale? Can you tell us?
In Guatemala.
They were both in Guatemala.
Yeah, they were in Guatemala. Amazing. They were a missionary couple.
Women. Oh, it was
missionary couple. She was a woman from Louisiana, and he was a man from Chile.
Wow.
They were married.
Amazing.
And they just served as mentors to me. And truly the voice of the Lord reminding me of my identity. And, they call gifts in me and that I needed to hear. I feel like I needed to be activated, and they serve as activators in my life.
That's so powerful, isn't it? Because sometimes I think in the church we view the traumatized as people who are kind of like projects to be ministered to. But actually what we see in the scripture is all kinds of trauma experiences in the heroes of faith. And so there's something so hopeful about calling out a plan and a hope and a future over us, that we're not discarded and that we're not spoiled or ruined in any kind of way, but that God redeems and there's hope. That's so beautiful. Yeah. So for women kind of considering calling, you talked a bit about starting a ministry and imagining your whole life would be a ministry. I know exactly what you mean by that, but I think there are lots of women watching this who probably are actually called into leadership in corporate spaces, but maybe might struggle with, would I be letting God down somehow, or is it not as good as working for a church? What would you say to that? If people feel an inkling of maybe a calling into corporate or creative industries or tech or...
We need you.
Yes.
We need you there. We desperately need New York. We're praying for more of you.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no shame. Like, if this is a calling, it's because God is inviting you to co-labor with you in the marketplace. And I told this to all the women and men that I mentor who are in the marketplace. You are probably the most powerful person there because Jesus lives inside of you.
Yeah.
And he is the most powerful person in the room.
Yeah.
And I feel like because we have the Holy Spirit living on the inside of us, we have wisdom, we have revelation, we have creativity, we have innovation. I hear about how sometimes in dreams, God downloads ideas for business and creative innovations. I heard a story once about someone that designed this bow and arrow, and the idea came to him on a dream. And now this is a public company, and the resources are being used to build a kingdom, to restore justice. So I encourage you that if you're called to be an attorney, if you're called to be in the creative arts, if you're called to be in tech, don't be afraid of it. That is ministry.
Absolutely.
That is not less holy than someone that preaches the gospel on a Sunday at church. Actually, that's how the Lord wants to use your life to expand the kingdom, to expand the gospel. And I feel like there is such a difference when people work in the marketplace with believers. Like, I remember at the hospital, people would say to me, what is it about you? There's something different.
Yeah.
And they see the light of the Lord in you. And it is such an opportunity to expand the kingdom, to have key conversations that you never know how God is going to use those key conversations to unlock hearts for him and to bring salvations, to bring healing. So I feel like there is such an opportunity in the marketplace. Like people are crying out to know Jesus, and he wants to partner with people like you and I.
Amazing. Thank you, Ale. So you heard it here. You know, don't squash down that voice of the Lord if he's stirring that kind of calling in you. So Ale, you are an amazing mentor to a lot of people. Can you talk a bit about the power of mentoring and why you think mentoring is so important?
I think that we are meant to run at the pace of relationships. I think that, God created us to live in communion with himself, but also in community with one another. We need one another. We need encouragement. We need someone that will call us out, call us upward, someone that will remind us of who God says we are and who God created us to be. And I think that's the power of mentors in this world, right? Is people that are going to not tell you what you necessarily always want to hear, right? I had mentors who have called me out and have challenged me. It's so hard, painful at times, but someone that will serve as a mirror to show you the beauty and the wonder of you, but also to show you what might be also limiting you, right? And out of love and speaking the truth in love will call you higher. I think about the story of David and Saul, right? And I oftentimes think, what would have happened if Saul was not jealous of David? Yeah. He had an opportunity to mentor him. And I just think about how if he was not jealous, or threatened by the power of David, who would David have become? And he became all that God created him to be. But I just feel like there is such an opportunity to pour into generations, younger than us. Like people are in need of mothers and fathers that will shape them, that will not be threatened of them, that will not be jealous of them, but that will champion them and just empower people to run in who God created them to be.
That's so beautiful. And you just exemplify that and live that out so wonderfully. And it's coming in the opposite spirit of competitiveness and insecurity and, spirit of comparison. You do that amazingly well. I think alongside mentorship, though, there's another thing, isn't there? And that's friendship. And successful people often can be quite lonely. It's actually a feature of leadership, sadly, that as people rise in their professions or even in the church, there can be real loneliness. Yes. What would you share around cultivating friendship and cultivating a kind of openness to relationships as well, so that some of this epidemic of loneliness could be addressed?
I agree with you. There is a loneliness epidemic on the rise. So many people, I will say, especially in global cities, people are wrestling with loneliness on a day-to-day. And I think that friendships are a space where you can come as you are. You don't have to perform for friendships or be someone that you're not. You can come as a human. And I think that's something really powerful, right? I see this in leaders. Sometimes there's this pressure to almost have to have it all together or be perfect. And it limits them from being human. And we're human. We need God's grace. We're weak. We have so many vulnerabilities. And I think that this is where healthy friendships come into the picture, right? Is people that are going to make space for our good days, but also our bad days, our put together days, but also our messy days.
Yes.
People who are going to give us permission to be vulnerable and real. People who are going to lend us strength when we need strength. I have an amazing group of friends, friends that don't always tell me what I want to hear. Yeah. Friends that are so honest with me and sharpen me. that
And who
call me
love you.
higher, and I
Yeah.
love them, and they
Yeah.
love me, and they make room for my humanity.
But how have you built that, Ali? What are some of the practical things because it doesn't just happen, does it, by accident?
Yes,
Friendship is something that needs to be worked on and built.
that's right.
What advice could you give to people to kind of go out to others, or how do we put the effort and work in that is required to build these kind of beautiful friendships?
I think it's a matter of quality over quantity, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we fall into the idea that we need
A crowd,
20 friends, a crew, and if that's you, God bless you. But I don't have the time for that. Sometimes it might just be 2 or 3 people that God might be highlighting for you in your community, or people that have similarities in story to you. And I think that is really vulnerable to build friendships, right? It requires vulnerability in approaching the person, in bridging that gap, in being intentional about creating time. Because I believe that in order to build trust, that comes over time, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the friendships that I have been persistent throughout the years. I have had a lot of the same friends for over a decade.
That's lovely.
Since I moved to the city, and when I moved here, I didn't know anyone, and a friend of mine would connect me to women in business sometimes, and I remember it requires intentionality and time and humility to say, I really want to build something with you. I want to build a friendship with you.
Make the effort to send that message and say, would you like to meet on this date? Actually put the arrangements in place.
Right.
Someone has to do that, right? And it's often women that do that, of course.
Like initiate connection.
Exactly. Another more painful aspect of relationships is conflict. And I know that you have a real gift in handling conflict, Alex. Slightly frightening. But this is something so many Christians struggle with. And I think it's really interesting you touched on, in your story about your family and the abuse that you experienced, how abuse actually went hand in hand with deception, and deception went hand in hand with pretending everything was fine. I would say that abuse, deception, and a sort of having to present a face that everything is fine characterizes abuse in the church as well, interestingly. So that really struck me from what you said. But could you share a bit about handling conflict and how can we grow in doing that better? I'm British, so we're terrified of conflict.
I'm Latina, and some
Not so
Latinos
much.
are, but some are not. And, I had mistakes where I have been messy. And I think that the most powerful people are people who are self-aware.
Yeah.
Right? The more we know thyself, we can learn about, okay, what triggers me? What makes me react?
Yeah.
And I think one of the foundations in conflict is discernment and is wisdom, right? Is I don't want to be someone that has conflict out of a place of retaliation or reaction.
Yes.
And, obviously, I feel like conflict is nuance, right? There are situations where you just have to confront and say something and
absolutely
get
where
out
it's
of
godly.
there. Exactly.
Yeah, you've got to confront injustice or harm or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. I remember someone in the train one time was abusing this woman. He was choking her in the train. It was 7 a.m. No one was doing anything. I remember standing up in the train and said to this guy, enough is enough. Let her go.
Yeah.
I will stand here until she leaves on the next stop.
Yeah.
And you stay here. And she did. The next stop, she left running and he stayed there. And then he cursed me out.
Yeah, I bet.
And I just surround myself with people. Those moments, conflict and action immediate. Yeah. But I feel like when it's with relationships, right? I always check my heart and I have to forgive, before I have a hard conversation. Because I don't want to have a conversation out of reaction or out of retaliation or unforgiveness. So I think that conflict breeds intimacy. Every time I have had conflict with a friend or with a trusted leader, I see how God uses that conflict to bring depth, to bring intimacy, and to bring freedom and honesty in the relationship. And I think that healthy conflict is a tool that we can use to call each other higher. It's a tool of consecration to help us be more like Jesus.
Wow. You also, I think, model something that I believe in really strongly, which is leading with and through vulnerability. I think for the first sort of 15, really before I wrote this book, I would have thought a lot about, as a women leader, often in male spaces, leading through strength and, you know, putting the work in and showing up and being consistent and being reliable and, you know, often kind of representing women. So you want to do a really, truly excellent job and hope the work speaks for itself. But I've really learned a lot in the last 5 years about leading through and in vulnerability. And we were just in Dallas together, weren't we, leading an event where we saw the Holy Spirit move wonderfully. And it just reminded me again that the Lord seems to love our vulnerability.
Yes.
And the Spirit seems to move. So can you share something about both the power of resilience, but also the power of leading through vulnerability?
I feel like I can't disconnect leading from being vulnerable, you know, and I think I have learned this because I have needed the Lord. I mean, there are so many parts of my story that are very vulnerable, where I have needed Jesus. And I think vulnerability is a practice to live an open life, to live a life in the open. And also, God uses our vulnerability to create hope and resilience in others, right? He uses our story as a testimony for others. And I think that oftentimes in positions of leaderships, there's almost like this separation of it's me and you. But I feel like vulnerability is us, right? Yeah. When we share our vulnerability in leading spaces, it's an invitation of it's us. Yeah. We're in this together. We're growing. We're in a process. I get scared before public speaking. And people, I think, can relate to that.
Absolutely.
It makes us relatable as leaders. It makes us human.
Totally.
And it makes us dependable on the grace of the Lord. And I think that that's an invitation, but also it's permission for people to feel like, wow, I can also be vulnerable. Just because I'm a powerful leader doesn't mean that I have to hide my vulnerabilities. And obviously, there is wisdom, right? And, you know, some of my vulnerabilities are just between me and the Lord and my closest friends. Yes. They are the pearls of my life. Yeah. But I think that in a lot of areas, I give myself permission to be as vulnerable as I can.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that the main characters of the Bible, the heroes of the Bible, we see all their flaws and vulnerability. Yes. None of that is edited out. Yes. It's like God specializes in moving in the lives of people who experience devastation or mess up and get things wrong. That's right. Or, you know, the sky actually does fall for them. So it's actually a really powerful biblical theme as well, isn't it? Okay, so we ask everyone who comes on this podcast, Ale, one question. It's the last question. And bearing in mind, you know, everything that you've shared so far, we think about the journey of that girl in Guatemala, that young woman surviving that traumatic abuse. You think about going to YWAM and meeting your husband and going to leadership school and then coming here. So many experiences, everything you've built here. And you reflect back on your life. And if you could say, through all the things that you've learned and seen the Lord do, if you could say one thing to your younger self, to that young woman in Guatemala, that she needed to hear, what would that one thing be?
God is on your team. And don't be afraid to confront resistance, the enemy will often resist what you are made to do, what he's the most afraid of doing. I think Robert Bly says something about where the wound is, that's where the brilliance comes.
Wow.
So in the wounding, in the journey, God will use it to help others and to bring beauty and brilliance into this world.
How beautiful and wonderful. What an amazing word to finish on today. Thank you so much, Ale Siekmeier, for coming on the show. You can follow Ale on all the social media platforms, and she's a wonderful, amazing woman. And thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation, vulnerable conversation, but also just so empowering. If you are enjoying the Lead podcast, can I ask you to do us the huge favour of leaving us a 5-star review? That would be great. And also following the show and maybe even subscribing. These small things really help get the word out about what we're doing. And please do check out Advocate Collective, our website, our ministry. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like to get involved or support what we're doing. Thank you so much for listening to the Lead podcast for Advocate Collective with me, Dr. Amy Orr-Ewing, with Ale Siekmeier today. And why don't you join us next week for another conversation?